On the British election, we are joined now by Nile Gardiner, the director of the Thatcher Center for Freedom at the Heritage Foundation. Mr. Gardiner also was an advisor to Margaret Thatcher and assisted with the writing of her latest book, Statecraft. He's also advised Congress and served on congressional task forces. Mr. Gardiner, welcome to Bloomberg News. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Sir, as Louise Beale was just saying, there are some thoughts that the outcome of today's election in the UK could change the political landscape for a generation, given the austerity measures that are going to have to be implemented. Would you agree with that assessment?
I don't agree necessarily that whoever is in power will be out for a generation, although I wouldn't underestimate for 1 minute at all the huge scale of the task in terms of addressing the mammoth economic problems facing the United Kingdom, which will be closely followed, of course, here in the United States as well. After all, the US is going down the same path of the United Kingdom in terms of a huge budget deficit. So I do think that the British and American economies are intricately intertwined, and so what happens in the UK will have a direct impact on the United States. But I do believe that the next British government, likely to be led by David Cameron, has to do whatever is necessary in order to deal with the economic situation, because unless the government is willing to do so, the long-term economic prognosis for the United Kingdom will be extremely serious. And what we're seeing now on the streets of Greece could well spread to other European countries, and it could even be a scenario possibly for the UK several years from now.
Now you're spelling out some dire circumstances here. Is Britain perilously close to tipping back to recession?
I think it is, and the fact of the matter is that the Labour government has been overspending at a terribly high rate, and we have to bring down levels of government spending in the United Kingdom. Margaret Thatcher faced the same situation when she took over Britain in 1979. Britain was on its knees. It had gone to the IMF for additional funding. I think that the scale of the economic crisis facing Britain today is similar to that faced by the Thatcher government in the 1980s. She managed to bring down public spending, which is what the Conservative government will have to do if it comes to power tomorrow.
So if the UK budget deficit is as problematic as what we're seeing in Greece right now, do you think austerity measures that just passed today for Greece are applicable to the UK?
I think there's no doubt about it that the United Kingdom government will have to implement some similar measures over the next 2 or 3 years. It's also important, I think, that the Cameron government, if elected, addresses the huge problem with the scale of welfare spending in the United Kingdom. And unless this government is willing to do so, I think that the long-term economic future for Britain will be extremely serious. Britain does have not only a hugely bloated public sector, but also a massive welfare state, a legacy from the post-war era. It's time to move beyond that to create a fully enterprise economy in the United Kingdom. And David Cameron has to take bold measures. He has to look, I think, to the example of Margaret Thatcher in terms of dealing with the economic situation.
And Niall, I want to mention, because you've mentioned David Cameron a lot, and he is obviously facing the current Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, and Mr. Clegg. Talk to me about specifically how they squared off in the debates, because as Louise mentioned, this was the first time the debates were televised. What did Britons learn?
Well, the debates electrified the political process. I think that Cameron actually came out very well from the final debate. He was the only one talking about cutting the budget deficit. He also addressed the immigration issue as well, which is very high on the agenda for Great Britain. Clegg, I think, was very weak on both immigration and the economy, and hence Clegg has fallen significantly in the polls recently.
All right, Niall, we're going to have to leave it there. Nile Gardiner, former Thatcher advisor, director of the Thatcher Center at the Heritage Foundation, on today's election in the UK. Thank you so much.